You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, this is episode 7 of Archaeoanimal. I'm your host, Alex Fitzpatrick, and with me as always,
Simona Falanga, still here.
Yeah, and also hiding, lurking, every so often popping in when we don't want him to, is producer Tristan. Today's episode, we are talking about something near and dear to both of our hearts, I'd like to say. We're talking about cats. So, any opening remarks about cats you'd like to state for the good people out there?
I guess we could start with making a little disclaimer that's not necessarily cat related.
Oh yeah, we talked about that before we even started recording and I already forgot.
Yes, so as our listeners may have realised, I think in one of our last episodes, I think it was episode 5, you may have heard mention of a Steph, or even better, a Canadian Steph. Now, Alex and I were in fact referring to Steph Halmofer, and I think I've just butchered her surname. Steph is a bioarchaeologist and fellow psychommer of ours, and she writes about archaeology and debunks pseudoscience over at her blog, which is bonesstonesandbooks.com. And evidently she's also known for being the only person in Canada called Steph. So shout out to Steph and sorry about that.
And thanks for calling me out on Twitter about that. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, cats. Let's talk about cats. Simona, you have a cat with you right now.
Oh yeah, she's right here. She's chilling.
Oh,
contemplating the meaning of life.
Aren't we all?
As she does.
But yeah, no. So cat bones, I think both of us have a lot to say about cats. Speaking as someone who's dealing with loads of cat bones in their assemblage right now, I think I know too much about cats at this point.
Great. I'm just going to go then.
No, please don't. I need you. I'm the one who makes sarcastic remarks, and then you have all of the knowledge. That's how it works. Cat bones, before I actually started working on my PhD work, I had never really run into cats in archaeological sites. Usually it's the domesticates, sheep, stuff like that. So cats, Simona, how rare are cats really in the average, at least British archaeological assemblage?
I think that in about 4 years experience, I think I found a tooth, and that's about it.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that common.
No. And that's actually, I think, topic of a debate, because I think it's been argued, do we not find cats because there were just not many of them, or is it because something related to their biology? Maybe they go somewhere else to die, so they're not going to be found in the settlement? Is it due to, I don't know, the way they were seen by past populations, so they wouldn't necessarily feature in either rubbish pits or associated with human burials or anything of sort? That's the beauty of cats. It just, nobody knows. Or someone more clever than me probably knows.
I think cats kind of run into that same issue that dogs have, where it's that in between of, do we consider them wild animals, domestic animals? There's a point where they kind of cross over into domestic animals. The cats that I'm dealing with right now. So if you're not familiar, I'm working in a bunch of Scottish caves that are later prehistoric in date, and there's loads of cats in these, and one of the big questions is, well, are these just wild random cats that are just living in these caves, or were they being used or domesticated by other people, things like that? It's a whole big thing.
I mean, what context are they recovered in?
See, I mean, we're still figuring that out right now. That's kind of the process we're doing right now, but it's just really strange. There's what was it, yesterday, I think I found just a whole cat, which was odd.
It's just that I'm not sure. I've not read very much literature on cave-dwelling cats. So it seems like almost like deliberate deposition where they are found. But then I'm not familiar with the site, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, the other thing that's making them really, it's really complicating things is the fact that we're finding, and by we, I mean me, because I'm the only person whose head is in all these bags. We're finding a cat gnawing on a bunch of bones, so it's active cats. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Well, I guess we can ask Bastet a bit more about it.
I would love to do some ethno archaeology, get some perspective, really.
Yeah, no, I think she'll want payment beforehand, before she reveals any secrets. So in the meantime, she'll just have a snooze, but she'll think about it.
Okay, well, let her get back to me. I still have like a year or two to get information about this.
And just in case someone is still like unaware, Bastet is actually my Siamese cat, and is Bastet with T-E-T like the Egyptian goddess and not like the swear word.
It's always important to make that distinction. Which
I do get a lot from people. They're like, why would you call your cat that? Be like, I haven't. It's Bastet. Never mind.
Moving away from my weird site, just kind of in general, how do we identify cat bones? What makes it different than some of the other average animal bones we find? Things like that. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think the number one thing is, again, their mandibles. If I see those teeth, I know exactly what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think the skull is probably the most distinctive of all parts. I mean, one that I find, but again, it's not necessarily indicative of cat as is of just carnivora, is no, thinking about it, because the humerus, the distal end of the humerus, sort of in the carnivora, that tends to be a hole that goes all the way through in the distal end. So for the uninitiated, that's the bottom bit that articulates with the ulna and radius. So there tends to be a hole that goes all the way through, and that's certainly true for dogs. There is a foramen of sorts in cats, but now I'm just realizing that it's slightly to the side. I will take photos and put them in the show notes. I've got some bones out with me, so I can actually have a bit of an idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, this is one of those times where it's kind of unfortunate that this is a audio medium and we're talking about bones.
And I guess the one thing, another thing, mostly a carnivora thing, not necessarily cats, as again in the distal humerus, sort of the articulation, like the distal end is more squashed.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense at all. That's being my professional terminology right there.
I think it'll make more sense once we have the show notes up, and listeners who are listening to this episode, you can always refer to the show notes. We're good for that, at least.
But yeah, the one thing, cat bones, really, any cranial bones, you can't miss them. The skulls are sort of very easily distinguishable just because they've got this gigantic orbit. That sort of really sets them aside from other animals. And again, the teeth are sort of very distinctive because they have, of course, a dentition that's very apt at eating meat, but it's a strictly sort of, because cats are obligate carnivores, so they need to have a very high percentage. I forget whether that's 75 or 90% meat content, because they're hypercarnivores. So, of course, their dentition will be more specialized towards that than, say, a dog. You will have, like, if you look at dog teeth, their molars, like they got their carnassials, but then the second and sometimes third molar, they're more prone at actually, chewing all sorts of food, while cat teeth are sort of very specifically for tearing and shearing meat.
Yeah.
So they just got like a beautiful collection of blades.
True, yeah. I mean, again, I'm a very simple person, so I usually just look for those teeth and I'll immediately be able to pick them out. This is going to sound so weird, but like all of cat bones are really cute. They're just so like not small all the time. They're pretty like small in comparison to like, let's say, a cow. They're just like nice and curved, and like everything's like, this sounds so weird, doesn't it?
But I find that with rabbit bones as well, though.
True, yeah, I see that as well. Like, I'm full disclosure, later in a few weeks, I'm getting another tattoo of a cat mandible. And I'm very excited because it's just, I just love cat bones so much. They're so nice. I'm annoyed by cat bones because there's too many in my assemblage and it makes me confused. But, I try my best.
Sorry, for a moment I thought you were going to say that you're getting a rabbit. I got excited and was like, oh. Cool tattoo,
bones. I'm just getting dead animals tattooed on my body. It's fine.
Wait a minute. How many tattoos of dead animals do you have
Not
already?
enough.
You make it sound like you're just adding.
I only have one bone tattooed on me. The rest of my tattoos are all like flowers and herbs and stuff. But my goal is to get more bones tattooed on my arm.
So long as you don't get a humorous with and I found this humorous line, because that's just no.
Oh no, I'm not a loser.
No more.
Oh, I mean, come on. We're barely 10 minutes in and we've got that joke here. Oh,
so this is the last episode of Archaeo Animals. I hope you all enjoyed this podcast, this very short podcast. I'm going to go and beat up Simona.
Why?
You're saying that like cat bones are always very, very dainty. Is there any animals that you can mistake cats for? I mean, because you can get big cats. Yeah. Right, and I'm not making tigers and leopards and stuff, and you can get like small cats. Are there any kind of similarities between cat bones and other ones that you could easily mistake them for?
Rabbits and hares, at least for me. Some of the long bones, I can get them mixed up.
I guess you could potentially mix it up with dog if it's a small dog.
Yeah, I get that too. That's because I'm also working with small dogs. Because I just can't get a moment's peace with my PhD work. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Those are all kind of in the same size range. Especially when you get fragmented long bones, it can be really easy to mix them up. So, Yeah,
because I guess around a similar-ish size, but not quite. There'll be badgers, but badger bones tend to be much stockier. So that's usually a dead giveaway.
Yeah, dead giveaway.
Is there anything in particular about older cat bones, maybe ones that are not as domesticated, compared to the bones of modern cats? How would you be able to tell the difference, if at all?
Larger. That's what I've been noticing so far from looking at other reference collections. Usually a lot bigger, like freakishly big at times. It's really weird.
Because I think the difference can be made with certain elements. So there's a study that Terry O'Connor has carried out, and I used to have the proper reference for this, but then my laptop decided to join Morpheus in an endless dream, so I haven't got any of those anymore. But I think so through biometry you would be able to get that differentiated. But I think also the main issue is hybridization, which of course messes everything up, and the great variability that you get, especially in later periods of different, not necessarily cat breeds, but just variation between individuals. So I think maybe one thing, I don't know whether I'm just talking nonsense, but one thing that might make it sort of differentiate between wild and domestic, that domestic animals in general tend to retain more juvenile traits compared to their wild counterparts.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of times it gets very dicey when it comes to differentiating, at least with morphologically with animals. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
It's just that it's like dogs. Of course, cat breeds developed much, much later compared to dogs. But so you do have this great sort of individual variation, because it's this whole thing of, much like in dogs, a beautiful, healthy wildcat, gets close to humans. What could possibly go wrong? Then you wake up one morning and you're a Persian.
Oh yeah, I hate when that happens. Specifically, we're talking about Persians, like the cat breed.
Well, yes,
disclaimer out there. I want to put a disclaimer out there. But yeah, no. It is weird and different, and I mean, I feel like dogs are a really good way to kind of compare the two, especially because we just did an episode about dogs, which feels like we did it 3 years ago, but I'm sure it wasn't that long ago.
I was going to make a pun, but I shall refrain. But I guess like they're comparable to dogs, but they're not at the same time, because I think the perception of cats throughout history has not been quite the same as in dogs. Because dogs have always they've been bred for a purpose throughout the centuries until we decided we're going to breed on looks, no matter the consequences. But they were always seen as cherished companions, at least by some. And you do get records going quite a bit further back with dogs being viewed as companion animals, regardless of, whether they were working or not. But with cats, it's a much more difficult relationship because you never know, were they really truly domesticates, or were they more commensals, provided that's how you pronounce it? Because they just happen to be around there because you have a barn that's full of mice and rats, and cats just got closer and sort of got rid of the cat or the rats, not necessarily because they wanted anything to do with you.
Yeah. Well, how about we take a quick break and then we will get back into all the stuff that we don't really know very well, but we'll just pretend we do.
Great.
Hey everybody, Chris Webster here, and just popping in to say the Archaeology Podcast Network is in dire need of your support. We can use support in one of three ways, really. Head on over to arcpodnet.com/members and join us at $5, $10, or $20 a year. We have 30% off annual discounts, and you get a whole bunch of extra things, including early episodes, bonus learning content, bonus episode content, a private Slack team to speak to everybody, including the hosts and other members, and a whole bunch of other little things. Also, we're actively taking donations. Thanks to all of you that donated over the holiday season. And finally, if you work for a company or you know of a company that would help underwrite the Archaeology Podcast Network for 2019, we've got amazing deals for underwriting and support of the network. So head on over to arcpodnet.com/members or arcpodnet.com/ads. Now back to the show.
We're back. So let's talk more about some really complex issues with cats. The hot discourse in cat bones here on Archaeo Animals, of course.
Why did cats even choose humans? Because dogs, we kind of choose dogs. I think it's roughly the kind of feeling around that kind of part of evolution. But cats seem to choose us. Why did cats choose us? Why do cats want anything to do with us? When I try and call one over, they walk away.
Well, that's because you're a horrible person.
I'm not a horrible person. No, they love me.
They know
you're so
it.
fluffy.
I know you're a horrible person. I've never met you in person.
The fluffy tails tell me otherwise. But tell me, why do cats like people?
What was that quote? Because cats used to be worshipped as gods and they've not forgotten this.
Yeah, it's something along the lines of that. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just kind of, once you start, you just keep going and it becomes more of a mutual dependence on each other, really, isn't it? I'm not an evolutionary biologist by any means, so...
Well, I guess so to bring it all back, I guess, with the origin of the domestic cat, because the domestic cat, Felis catus, is the domesticated form of Felis sylvestris lybica, which is the African wildcat. And, well, in the past, as much as in present day, has a range that sort of spans across North Africa all the way to the Near and Middle East. So supposedly, the African wildcat was domesticated sort of in the Near and Middle East, contrary to sort of popular belief beforehand, which sort of attributed the domestication of the cat by the ancient Egyptians. Even though, of course, big disclaimer in flashing bold lights, that of course, whenever we talk about domestication, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. So where you have multiple domestication attempts that have taken place in different geographic locations over time. But so the canon explanation behind the domestication of the cat is that with the advent of agriculture, and so the advent, therefore, of grain storage, mice starts getting in and become a problem. So from there, there's two different options that could go from there, and possibly both at the same time, or not at the same time. Either cats see that opportunity and move in to prey on sort of this endless resource of prey, or cats get specifically systematically trapped by the humans, brought back to the settlement to get rid of the mice problem. Although there's also like another thing which wouldn't have been, the main reason for domestication, but something that in my opinion should be considered as well, is that the human propension towards anything that's cute and fluffy. Because we do have things sort of in the archaeological record, or like with exotic animals. I think you have a burial of a young lynx cub in North America that was given almost a human's burial, which like there would be like no particular reason to grab a lynx from the wild and bring it back to the settlement, if not like it's cute and fluffy. Maybe the mother abandoned it, or the mother died, or whatever reason. I'm going to bring it back because it's cute.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that also reminds me of the fact that, like, in general, sometimes when you find these kind of strange, like, animal bits and pieces and assemblages, like, I feel like sometimes we forget that people could have picked them up because, like you said, they're cute and fluffy, or they just kind of look cool. Like, I worked on a site where there was all this, like, cod, like Atlantic cod fish. And then randomly there was a monkfish jaw. And, it felt so weird and out of place. But honestly, what I always thought was like, someone probably caught it and was like, this looks really cool, I'm going to keep it.
Well,
it's a very simple thing.
People, I don't think, put much emphasis in that, because especially when we talk about prehistory, and that's a very, very small tangent that I'll be making. I feel that sometimes a lot of people forget that even in prehistory, I mean, we're the same people who thought and felt in very similar, in the same exact way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's the archaeology of the mundane and the mediocre, People always forget.
And also, like, even though, it's not always accurate to make comparisons with the ethnographic record, you do have some cultures, like to this day, that will take weaned animals and bring them back to their settlements, and they'll keep them.
Yeah.
For no particular reason other than because it's cute, it's fluffy, I'm going to keep it and look after it.
I mean, you also look at people, and like you hear stories about in the United States of people who straight up will just keep like a tiger in their house. So it's not like we've really stopped doing it.
I'm not too sure, because I'm not sure how you'd get a tiger in the US and how legal that would be. But
super easily. That's what I've learned.
Okay, because I know like some like people in the US that keep coyotes as pets. Because maybe it was animals that were injured, and then they just decided to keep them, and they're just lovely. Just
I mean, to be fair, just repping my hometown on Long Island, someone got arrested when I was in high school because they were keeping exotic pets, including a crocodile, in their house. So
just
it happens.
No.
It happens. Yeah.
But
we've literally not changed as a species. We're the same people, just collecting things that are interesting, including animals.
Well, because you get that, and again, like tangent over with this. So you do get sometimes prehistoric flint tools, like hand axes, found in, say, in Roman context. And you're like, what's this Paleolithic thing doing here? And probably just someone found it, be like, oh, that looks pretty cool. I'm going to keep it for a bit. And then after a while, change my mind, toss it in a ditch.
Yeah, exactly. You have no idea what, I mean, that's ultimately the thing that I think in archaeology you end up kind of having to make peace with, is the fact that at the end of the day, we can't get into the mind of prehistoric peoples, and we can't understand necessarily, why they were surrounding themselves with cats.
Just people are weird and unpredictable, and there's the whole factor of, I've done it just because.
Yeah.
So these are the possible theories about how sort of cat domestication came about. But then, of course, that still sets them aside from dogs and other domesticates, because they weren't necessarily viewed as pets or companion animals, because they were sometimes purposely kept around the settlement as ratters, and sometimes just cats just moved in there. Mm-hmm. Which is why sort of like they have not, you don't see sort of a variation of cat breeds and color codes and all that we really won't be able to see in the archaeological record, but you don't really see a cat fancy or a conscious effort to breed cats to get specific traits. You don't really see that until the end of the 1800s when, the cat fancy emerged and people started breeding cats, but again, based on how they look, because even like to this day, because dogs to an extent still will have functions, you do have lines of working animals. Cats just come in all this weird and wonderful variety of coats and colours, but it tends to just be mostly related to looks rather than anything else.
We just like the fluffy cats, like Bone Bone, who's my favorite cat on the internet, and I think everyone should go look at Bone Bone the cat. After we record, Simona, I will send you multiple pictures of Bone Bone the cat.
Excellent.
It's a big, fat, fluffy cat. I love him.
Yeah, and of course, another difference sort of with cats compared to other domesticates is that despite, we know they've been revered in some cultures and, have this sort of almost this mystical and supernatural powers attributed to them, cats have certainly been getting the stick for centuries and centuries. I don't feel like that historically cats have had a very, very good time in a lot of pastime periods, really. Because, and we'll get to that, because even sort of, ancient Egypt, where like people think, oh, cats were viewed as gods and revered. Yes and no.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it did vary. Like if you made a timeline and you kind of just like plotted, where the perception of cats was at any given time, at least in the majority, it definitely goes up and down a bit.
but mostly down.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess. I guess we feel like we have to get a little bit more into about the Egyptian cat thing.
Can do.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of just have to. But I think that's what most people kind of think of when they think of cats in history, is like we were saying, the Egyptians worship the cats and things like that. When which
they did, but also with some hints of capitalism.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, isn't that the history of everything? There's some hints of capitalism.
No, cats, because I believe so. The first depiction of cats in ancient Egypt date back to about 3,500 BCE. So you see them a lot in temple art, and they're usually depicted, in baskets or under someone else's chair or table, which, they could very well be tamed wildcats, but because of the context, you do tend to presume that they're domestic individuals. That's, again, another thing to add to distinguishing between wild and domestic. Sometimes really all you've got to go by is context. And, as we all know, time goes by, and actually the cat's prominence sort of in mythology and religion increases. So you do have, about 4,800 BCE, you have the worship of Bastet starts coming into play.
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't get real big until sort of the Ptolemaic period, I believe. So, like, more towards Roman times.
Yeah, like a Hellenic, isn't it? Like the Hellenic period, more or less, from what I remember.
So, like, because she did have an annual feast day, I think, back in what Herodotus essentially described as a gigantic piss-up.
Is that textually, like, that's exactly like quoted what he said?
No, but that's what it boils down to pretty much. It's just, I think there was something about a lot of drinking and a lot of intercourse.
Well, yeah. Duh.
But Bastet approves, because I said, like, I do have the very reincarnation of the goddess just sleeping on a couch right now.
And we're so lucky.
Yeah.
And so blessed, really. Kind of moving away from Egyptian cats, though, like, the other thing I think of when I think of cats in the past is, isn't it Freya, who's in Norse mythology, who's driven around by cats or something?
Yeah, it's like in the chariot that's brought forward by cats. Yes.
Yeah, that's the only other thing I think of, and then it kind of just, goes away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, do cats really play a prominent role in any other cultural context in the past?
They probably have done, but none that immediately spring to mind, because usually you think cats, you think ancient Egypt.
Yeah, exactly.
So the mummified.
I mean, we obviously they were there, but again, it's the idea of like, it's just perception, isn't it? You could easily think cats are just pests and have zero artwork around of them and things like that, and then after a while they become, pets instead. Things like that.
Yeah, because I think they started becoming proper pets sort of in the post-medieval period, where some of the nobility took to keeping them as pets, so it was almost like a status thing.
Yeah, and also that just reminded me, we find evidence of cats being skinned on archaeological sites, don't we?
Yeah, I find like mostly medieval sites, so like there were good chances that they were used for their fur, because you tend to have like, it's not necessarily always the case, but it tends to be that a lot of the cat bones that are found, say in medieval contexts, that bear butchering and skinning marks, tend to be subadult. So again, sort of that prime age where they're sort of pretty much fully grown, where like keeping them alive any longer won't necessarily give you more of an economic return, so they'll just kill them off there and then.
I feel really sad that I brought this up now.
Which links us back, because the one thing that we forgot to mention about ancient Egyptian cats, it's just also the year, so the age of death, it was one of the main sort of reason for debunking the whole, Egyptians were really lovely to cats and they really love their cats. And again, it's like yes and no, because supposedly it was a crime to kill a cat in ancient Egypt, unless you were a priest, in which case it was fine. Because, of course, cat mummies were sold essentially as souvenirs. Pretty much is what it boils down to. So, like, they'd have catteries within temples, and they would get sort of routinely killed and mummified to be sold off to tourists and pilgrims. Because the one thing that we found, because we got so many cat mummies and they've been CT scanned, and the first thing was, hang on a minute, they're all about a year old. How did they all die so young? That's a bit weird. And then look more into it. Oh, they all seem to have their neck snapped. Oh, righty then.
Yeah,
so
what a strange coincidence.
Yeah, so it's like, no, ancient Egypt, killing cats, no, unless you're a priest. If you're a priest, that's fine.
Although, again, I guess it's a bit of different perception of death and all that other jazz. We can get really abstract into it, but we won't for the sake of the listeners.
Yeah. But that's the a bit of an unfortunate truth about Egyptian cats. But moving on, happier cats, maybe. Well, actually, no, it's just as much of a sad cat story, really. But I feel one that we should really be talking about is the Cyprus cat burial.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because, of course, that's another interesting one when it comes to cat domestication and introduction. Because the thing that's really interesting about Cyprus is that the island was actually never joined to the mainland and had no native cat population whatsoever. So all the cat remains that have been found archaeologically must have been from cats that were purposely brought to the island.
Yeah.
So now there's one that's particularly interesting because it dates back to 7,500 BCE. Mm-hmm. And it's found in association with a human burial. So it's this cat that's been buried with a person. Again, slight sad note about the cat. The cat also seemed to be less than a year old. So chances are it was killed and then put in the grave with the person. But you think so the implications of that seem to be that perhaps it showed some sort of companionship. So to bury the cat with possibly the owner. Mm-hmm. Someone who cherished that animal while they were alive. Although, frankly, I know if I suddenly died, please don't kill my cat and put it in my grave. Just please don't do it. I love my cat. Don't do that. Just don't.
So that's a slightly happier story-ish in comparison to what we were talking about. It's very hard to find happy stories when it comes to talking about dead animals, I feel like.
I feel we should take a break instead.
Yeah, sounds good.
Hey everybody, Chris Webster here, co-founder of the Archaeology Podcast Network, and I just wanted to let you know about all the other great shows we have on the APN. We have the CRM Archaeology Podcast, the Anarchaeologist Podcast, the Archaeology Show, Heritage Voices, Prehistories, the Archaeotech Podcast, You Call This Archaeology, Profiles in CRM, and a random conference channel. So check all that out at archpodnet.com. Now back to the show.
So I've got a few questions about cats, and I'm hoping that you can kind of guide me through these wonderful questions. Obviously, you guys have talked about how domestication is different, where, wild cats are usually typically larger, domestic cats are typically smaller, which is something we kind of see in other domesticates. I remember you guys talking in the cow episode that typically domesticated animals are smaller. That's true, isn't it?
Yeah, they tend to get smaller until they get bigger again.
Okay. Well, I've seen the pictures of Maine Coons and like ragdolls, and it's amazing. It's so fluffy, so big, but I'm kind of scared of them as well. But I find really interesting about cats is that where other animals, like you've talked before, like dogs, cows, there was a direct kind of like use for them. There's a very direct kind of thing that you could do. Dogs you can kind of almost train to do stuff, whereas cats are very different to that. And I think, you guys were saying there's not really, when people think of cats, it's ancient Egypt. I mean, there's plenty of like idioms and ideas that we have about cats, like, don't let a black cat cross your path. I mean, there are some things from the medieval times, more horrible things. I think cats have a very special place with humans, and I'm just wondering if you guys could shed a little light about like how do we relate to cats nowadays that might be a bit more different to how we kind of behaved to them in the past. I mean, nobody's mummifying cats, but maybe, is there something we can learn about how we treat cats nowadays as opposed to the past, or is there anything to be learned there?
I still feel like there's a lot of sort of undeserved bad rep when it comes to cats.
Yeah, like what?
Because I think they're still, they're liked, I guess, now more than ever, but they're still sort of regarded as selfish beings.
I get that.
When or like, because again, one of the issue that we have, but that's not just with cats, that's with a lot of animals, we tend to personify them. So by giving them human attributes, it's sort of like, it defeats the entire purpose. It's just a cat being a cat. It's not being mean, it's not being cruel. That means nothing to a cat.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways we're personifying cats even more these days. I mean, think of the fact that we now have pet celebrities. Like I was talking about how much I love Bone the cat, who literally has his own Facebook page and Instagram page and YouTube channel. It's funny, like we really are kind of going back, the pendulum swinging again, where we do have these ideas of cats as like, they're grumpy, they don't like being around people, things like that. But we still kind of uplift a lot of these cats into almost, I would say, like Egyptian, like deity type stuff.
Also, because I think a lot is lack of understanding. Because say that cats are being grumpy and they're mean with dogs and other cats, and they get stressed too easily. But the truth is that the cat evolved as a solitary animal.
Yeah.
You only really see groups of cats in feral colonies. So in cats that were domesticated, but that have now been sort of in the wild or stray for a number of generations. So you see small colonies appear where they sort of collaborate over certain things. But of course, you've taken an animal that has evolved to be solitary, as most felids are, with very few exceptions, and you're throwing them, in a multi-cat household or with other dogs. And chances are, some cats are absolutely fine, and they form long-lasting bond, with the other cats in the household or the dog. But sometimes that doesn't go well. But it's just, it doesn't always work. I feel like I've gone completely off point.
I mean, I think it still ties into the fact that in terms of understanding cats, there's still, like, at least in the majority, we're still doing something that people in the past have always been doing, which is kind of seeing cats and other animals through this very human perspective, which means applying very human things to animals. It's actually something I'm really interested in terms of zooarchaeology in general, the way we kind of look at animals and, you know, we look at them from the perspective of a human. So everything that we look at faunal bones, we're always saying, okay, but how do humans play into this? We're very selfish.
Oh, we are. But I guess the one thing that probably is not as prominent, though it is still prominent to an extent, is sort of the perception of cats as sort of like this almost, well, not mystical creature, that's not the right term, but sort of giving this almost mystical powers, attributing them to cats as how they're able to sense supernatural activity.
Yeah, like maybe more like metaphysical conduits, if that makes more sense.
Which sort of like goes back, because what Tristan was mentioning, you know, no one is mummifying cats these days, but they were until surprisingly recently. Because one thing that we've not mentioned is the beauty that are dried cats.
Oh, I love dried cats.
That are found pretty much almost exclusively in English-speaking countries, and most of all in the British Isles, absolutely littered with them.
Good job. We all did it.
It's sort of in post-medieval buildings, you do find mummified cats in the walls of buildings. And now we know that a lot of them, it's not cats that have crawled in there and died.
No.
Because a lot of them have been posed in hunting poses before rigor mortis set in. Some of them were posed with equally mummified mice and rats. And they tended to be usually, you know, above the earth or above thresholds.
Yeah. Like, I actually really love this kind of stuff. I think it's really interesting. And also just reminded me that we're kind of going back to that, because something I'm kind of obsessed with is there's this, I don't know if you've seen it, Simona, but there's this like growing trend of taxidermists working with pet owners so that when their pet dies, they will get them taxidermied. So like a lot of times it's cats getting taxidermied after death. So in a lot of ways, it's very similar to the dried cat thing.
Yeah, like it is, and it is, because with the dried cats, it's likely they were deliberately killed to put in the walls.
True.
Because, and this is the weird thing, because of course it's the post-medieval period, so you'd think you'd have plenty of written records about the subject, but no one is actually 100% sure of why they were walled in these buildings, because like you have different options. They're like that perhaps because cats were believed to have an insight into the supernatural world, is that they were sort of an almost ghost mice carer, would be hunting mice in the spiritual plane. There's a theory that they were put there to keep witches away. Mm-hmm.
That's the one I know mostly.
Or just keep evil away in general. Although I'm not sure why they'll keep witches away, because cats have been historically associated as witches' familiars. So if anything, if I was a cat, I'd be inviting all the witches to the party.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe it's kind of like the idea of taking your enemy's like decapitated head and putting it out in front to ward off the rest of them.
So, but yeah, it's a thing that it is really popular in the British Isles, because I think so many have been found, and from what I've read, unfortunately, a lot of them ended up in skips. Yeah,
which, I mean, I would love a dried cat. Not like one made now, but if anyone has a dried cat from like, you know.
Okay, so send Alex a dried cat.
Yeah, I'm sure my partner will love it if we start getting dried cats in the mail.
But we do still have, you know, loads, and they tend to, but museums that they'll have so many, a lot of them are in storage because we just have so many of them.
Stop drying your cats, please.
Although, like, if you do want to take a look at a load of dried cats, the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle in Cornwall has a load of them on display.
Oh, I need to go there. I need to go there so bad.
It's yeah, again, very small tangent. Is a great museum. Yeah, do go there. They got lots of very interesting stuff.
Yeah. Dread cats. Sorry, I'm just still thinking about people sending me dried cats in the post and how that would go down. I guess I could be really protected from witches if people keep sending me dried cats. I'll just put them out in front of my house.
Well, you have found, because a few, I think, pubs that have had renovation works, they have found dried cats. I mean, there's a fair few that they put them on display.
I mean, yeah, fair enough.
Which is great.
Yeah, if you've got a dried cat, you might as well put it to use.
Mm-hmm. Some were found with dogs, and I got no idea what's up with that.
That's actually really cool.
There's been a few finds of dried cats associated with sort of lurcher type dogs.
Ooh, that's actually really cool. I didn't hear about that.
But I guess if anyone's interested, I mean, I'm going to put a load of links and book titles in the show notes. But if anyone is interested in learning more about this side of things and the almost the archaeology of counter witchcraft and sort of an author to really look out for is Brian Hoggart. And now he's written for a load of publications, and that if you can't access them for a reason or another, he does have his own website called Apotropeus. And there's a wealth of information on dried cats and other weird and wonderful things that you might want to be looking into.
Well, I think dried cats is a great place to end this episode.
I guess all of our topics have dried up.
Oh God, okay, end the podcast now. We'll see you next time on Archaeo Animals, or not.
What are we doing next time, do you think? What else you got this year?
More
ritual
episodes, rituals, which will probably be 30 episodes.
Ritual.
Yeah.
Oh, ritual. Jeez.
That's what I'm personally. It's what me and Simona really like, and also I'm literally working on that with my PhD. So.
Right. What about you, Simona? What do you think? What are we going to talk about the rest of this year? What can people expect for Archaeo Animals?
Bones.
Oh my God.
Yes,
if anyone wants to host this podcast instead of Simona, please tweet at us.
Ooh, right. Before we get too dangerous, thank you very much for listening. It's bye from me.
Bye from me.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Archaeo Animals. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. You can find us on Twitter at Archaeo Animals. Also, the views expressed on the podcast are those of ourselves, the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily represent those of our institution, employers, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
I want to apologize to everybody listening to this for all the egregious uses of puns throughout this entire show. If you want to hear more of these puns, head over to the Archaeology Podcast Network, where Archaeo Animals has all the previous episodes, including puns as well. And I want to finally bow out with saying hello and come over here and I will pet you to all the cats in the world. Because you know what? I really like cats. I like little fluffy ones. I like tall, skinny ones. I like all kinds of cats. Cats are important. Cats are special. And yeah.
I'm canceling this podcast.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.